CNN learning that Trump advisor Kash Patel testified yesterday before the grand jury investigating the classified documents found at Mar-a-Lago. Now, the important thing here is that he did this with immunity, right? He answered the questions. He did it with immunity. He had initially declined to answer questions from the grand jury by taking the fifth. Then a judge granted him immunity, and so that's what we actually saw yesterday. Today, though, Patel is now downplaying his testimony, saying, quote, via a spokesperson, Mr. Patel categorically denies reaching any immunity deal with the government. Rather, his testimony was compelled over his objection through the only legal means available to the government, a grant of limited immunity. Out front now, Ryan Goodman, co-editor-in-chief of Just Security and the former special counsel at the Defense Department, and longtime conservative attorney George Conway. And it's great to have both of you with me here tonight. Okay, so George, Kash Patel was a national security and defense official during the Trump administration. He was important here in the final days. He was important. He's important with Mar-a-Lago. He goes in today and testifies, and he's making a big stink about how it was compelled, it still wasn't friendly. But you usually don't give immunity unless you know somebody has something you need. What do you read into all this?
Well, I think he's trying to make it like he was compelled. There's no question.
Yeah.
He was compelled, and I think he just wants to make sure that people don't think he's just ratting out Trump. In terms of the significance of the immunity, I mean, it forces him to testify. He can't invoke the Fifth Amendment. He will go to jail if he says, I'm not answering your questions. And so it forces him to answer questions under oath to questions like, did Donald Trump really do the Karnak the Magnificent brainwave declassification?
Right, I can just think about it
and declassify it. And it's one thing to say that on Newsmax or Breitbart or some news outlet, a right-wing news outlet that's happened. It's another thing to say it to a federal grand jury under oath.
Right, because there's the serious penalty for lying. Right. So Ryan, obviously the statement that came out was defense of Trump. Calm down, Trump. Oh, I was forced to be there. I was forced to be there. But here's the thing: Patel has, to your point, he's spoken to a lot of media outlets. He has become a very fierce defender of pretty much anything Trump did on the documents investigation. Here's just a couple examples.
This entire raid on his house, I believe, was to prevent the disclosure now that the government gangsters are back in charge of their corrupt activities from Russiagate on down.
What they've done is a shock and awe campaign based on what Vogue magazine would have done by a pictorial display of splashing around papers on the floor.
Okay, so that's what he said. Now, he's compelled, he goes in, he's under oath. How much can they expect to get out of him, though, if that's clearly the attitude that he has?
Right. So he's not a cooperative witness. And he might say, I don't remember, I don't recall. But it's going to be hard. Is he going to say, I don't remember, I don't recall a declassification order? Probably, in some sense. But that's actually getting something out of him. So I do think that they have that they'll get that kind of information. And then he obviously seems to be very close to Trump. Trump makes him a formal representative to the National Archives in the midst of all of this.
Right.
So he's a key person to ask some key questions, including, you've spoken a lot about what was held in these documents at Mar-a-Lago. Did Trump ever give you access?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. He can't say so much I don't recall, because he did say he recalled that Trump magically did it by thinking about it, right? So he recalls.
Absolutely. I think he has to answer some of these questions, and especially in that. And then he seems to have a deep knowledge of Trump's even plans of what he wanted to do with the documents. He's talked about it time and time and time and time again. So he seems to have a pretty specific recollection, one might say.
And if he does have that recollection, the prosecutors are going to drill down on it. Okay, when did it happen? Is there a document? Who else saw this? And they're going to ask all the questions they can think of to show that he can't document this and can't prove this. And that shows that the government is, as much as anything, preparing for trial.
Okay, so preparing for trial, you're talking about indictments, you're talking about all of this. And there's one thing that Trump thinks he could do to stymie this, to complicate it, and that would be to announce his bid for the White House. So sources telling CNN, George, that it's the third week of November. The top Trump aides are eyeing for him to announce that he's running in 2024, maybe November 14th, 6 days after Election Day. So they've even thrown a specific date out, which means he probably won't do it on that day because he likes to play games, but you get the point. How does this play? If he announces, what happens then with the possible indictment?
Well, I think it's inevitable that he's going to announce. I think because he can't stand.
He can't not now.
He can't, right. He's put himself out there, but he was never not going to run because he can't deal with not being the center of attention, and he wants revenge. And this whole psychology of the situation for him, even apart from the criminal liability potential, was driving him to run. But with the criminal liability potential, he wants to use the possibility of his becoming president again as a shield against prosecution, the way he used the presidency again as a shield for 4 years.
But is it a shield, Ryan? I mean, you're talking about if they can prove, and I understand they would have to have it so buttoned up, right? They can't take any sort of a real case to make. Is it a shield?
So it's a shield if he actually won the White House, because then he gets 4 years of immunity. And there's a bit of a shield in a certain sense as a political candidate running for office. We know that the Justice Department wouldn't do anything 60 days before an election, but they also have procedures for political candidates. And I think it's about that norm. It's about the optics. So I do think it is this question of, does it create any hesitation on the part of Garland, because does it appear as though he's being political when in fact what he's doing is just applying the law to a private citizen?
So then what do? Does a special counsel prevent this? I mean, do they just tread water for the next 2 weeks to see if he wins? I mean, what do they do?
I think they have to go and prosecute him. I think there's so much evidence that we have seen, and we obviously have only seen the tip of the iceberg. I mean, he stole the stuff. They found the stuff at Mar-a-Lago. He didn't give he jerked around the National Archives for a year plus. He had people lie about it. He tried to get other people to lie about it, and lo and behold, the documents were there. So.
Right. And just, to put the exclamation point on it, and we're just talking about the Mar-a-Lago documents. We're not talking about January 6th. We're not talking about anything criminal there. I mean, we're talking about one specific thing, and there's that, then there's the Georgia case. There's a lot of other things going on.